Welcome to the latest edition of Coffee and Counsel. I'm Louise Myers, Employment Solicitor Managing Partner here at CG, and today we're going to look at when you can dispose of a former employee's personnel file safely. When can you dispose of a former employee's personnel file? You're required to keep a personnel file for each employee, which is likely to include lots of information. Much of it is highly personal. When an employee leaves your employment, when can you delete or destroy this file? Once an employee leaves your employment, there is no legally prescribed retention period for personnel files, although there are prescribed retention periods for certain records they contain. You will have all sorts of different information within the personnel file, from information about employees' recruitment, to terms and conditions of employment, to pay and health records, as well as things like disciplinaries or grievances and the reason for leaving. It's up to you to determine how long you will keep an employee's personnel file, but at the very least, we advise you should keep the personnel file for 7 years. This sounds like a long time, but it is based on the fact that an employee has 6 years from the termination of their employment to bring a breach of contract claim against an employer. If you have already deleted their personnel file, you might not be able to defend the claim that they bring against you. The additional year gives some wriggle room. Having said this, we suggest to comply with GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, that each year you carry out a trawl of leavers' personnel files and delete or destroy any documents that are no longer required to be retained. We suggest keeping a policy in place for employment records and their retention and erasure. These guidelines should then be followed each year, removing the documents that are no longer required. So, for example, data like recruitment records, including CVs or equal opportunities monitoring forms, would only need to be kept for 6 months after a recruitment exercise, as an employee or applicant's right to a claim for discrimination falls away within that period. And similarly, immigration checks would only need to be kept for 3 years after termination of employment. Before you make any final decision about how long you keep a personnel file or the documents in it, you should speak to your insurers, as some liability insurers require the retention of personnel files for much longer. We can assist by preparing retention and erasure guidelines for employment records so that the organisation takes a consistent approach.